Welcome back to the PFC podcast. The views and opinions you are about to hear are the speakers and do not necessarily reflect those of anyone else. Now on to the podcast.
Welcome back to the PFC podcast. This is Dennis, and today I'm with John. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Appreciate you guys having me.
Awesome. So today's podcast, I'd like to talk about training, I don't know, philosophy or methodology, however you want to think about it. But like, how do we do this better? So why don't we, if you wouldn't mind, just do a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, my name is John. I'm the program manager of CIMIC Training Solutions, which is a SOCOM approved vendor for advanced medical training, if you will. I was a former SOCOM, grew up at 375, and that's basically it. I've been in this space my entire adult life, so going on 16, almost 17 years in the pre-hospital medicine on the battlefield type of space.
All right. Well, very good. You're the perfect guy. So the reason why I asked you on specifically on the Next Generation Combat Medic blog, I saw an article that you had written with Mike Gloria and Andy Fisher on, just training, how we're screwing up and, kind of how we can do better. So, my first question is, what the hell's wrong with what we're doing now? Like, it's worked since the beginning of time, and it's worked so far. Why do we got to change it?
Well, it's not necessarily changing it. It's just a refocus on how we approach it. So, this originally came from a YouTube video that I did after kind of, just over the years and different social media posts and people, marketing their company and the way they do things and all that kind of business. I really identified that there's not really any rhyme or reason behind the way that people go about training. It's just, it can range from someone having a very regimented approach to it to someone throwing dodgeballs at someone while they put a tourniquet on. Like there's no established guidelines on that kind of stuff. So, really, I did a video kind of explaining that and doing peer review of different videos and ways of, people are doing live fire packing drills on YouTube and stuff like that. And these are taught by legit individuals who have backgrounds and accolades from the war and all sorts of stuff. And they still think it's appropriate to do a live fire wound packing on a wound cube. And it's like, it's not necessarily bad. It's just ineffective in a lot of ways, and that's what I want to explain in the video. And then furthermore, with this paper that stemmed from it, because I did the video, and I obviously know Dr. Fisher from my time in regiment, although we weren't friends because I was an E4 and he was a captain. But we reconnected later on in life, and he got Dr. Loria, who's a former PJ, turned physician. I think he's an emergency medicine physician now. And, they really liked what I explained in the video, obviously in much more lay terms video-wise than it was in the paper. And they were able to connect the dots for me a little bit on some of the things that the way I approach training and have evolved how I approach training to legit actual theories that are evidence-based in nature. And we just did it because you realize after a couple of years of training dudes and, oh man, we're going to do another trip up the hill. And then they leave and they're like, that was crazy. That was awesome. Thank you so much. And, but you're watching and they're like, they aren't any better at any of the things that we went over the last few days. Like the dressings still look like a gypsy camp. Tourniquets are still loose. Tourniquet tabs aren't secured. There was no rhyme or reason behind how they approached the MASCAL. There was no roles or responsibilities. Like, these are all things we went over, but no one's good at it still. Mm-hmm. So they took a real just kind of just years of introspection and just being like, how do we change this so that dudes get actually better, as opposed to leaving feeling like that was awesome. I want them to feel like that was awesome, and also I feel more confident in myself and more confident in the gear that I carry, that if this does happen to me, the dude in front of me gets shot, I'm not going to just do whatever. I actually have an established foundation to draw from, and that's kind of the purpose of the paper, is to really kind of express the importance of creating and developing curriculum that results in far skill transfer. Like, skill atrophy happens immediately after you stop doing it, right? And within a couple of weeks, that is, you can basically guarantee that there's going to be some form of degradation that happens, whether it takes longer to do the skill or something like that. We're asking people to do this once every year or once every 2 years as far as sustainment goes, and then try and reproduce that in the next 6, 7, 8, 9 months. They can do T-CCC during the training cycle and then not have to actually do anything in real life on someone until 7 months later. And how do you think they're going to perform if you didn't approach it in a manner that was action focused and deliberate in the way that you went about it? You're not going to. So yeah, that's where the paper came from, and they were able, like I said, to kind of gear me towards doctor speak and how to, and obviously they did a lot of the writing as well, but luckily they gave me the lead author acronym to put on my resume, despite not having a bachelor's degree yet.
Yeah. So if we would, if we can, let's go through some of the phases learning. So like classic, just like SOCM, we both went through, initially it's all book. You're just cramming information in your head, then the skills start coming on, then you start doing scenarios. Is that the right way to do it?
It is, yeah. Okay. I mean, that's just the kind of try and true crawl, walk, run phase or approach to training. It's just after that, it kind of leaves in a lot of ways, depending on what organization you're from. But no, there should be more of a reimagining of it, and that's what I kind of a portion of the paper talked about sim zones, which is kind of just, it's crawl, walk, run, but it's put into zones, and it's put into 4 separate zones. And zone 0 is your crawl. It's your why. It's your didactic classroom. Why the heck do we even do this stuff? And it's the foundational knowledge that that kind of connects the dots for people. You can't just do practical applications. You really can't, because no one's going to know when something's appropriate to do, right? They're just going to look at blood and say, that needs a tourniquet. And you're going to get a lot of the things that we see in Ukraine or with cops or whatever, they gunshot wound in the leg, tourniquet, no matter what. Yeah. It's like, all right, you clearly lack foundational knowledge and basic understanding on the anatomy, physiology, and just history of things and all that kind of stuff. It's very important because it prevents people from reinventing the wheel or going back in time with things, right? Because if they don't know why they're doing something, then we're just going to go back to tourniquets are bad again or something like that. Well, you do need to know something. And then from there, your zone 0 is your foundation knowledge, your theoretical framework, and then you start to put it into your walk phase or your zone 1 and zone 2 type of stuff, where zone 1 is more skill stations. It's action focused. It's very clear, concise briefing in terms of what I want from you, what you need to be successful, and I'm going to baby you through it until you can do it on your own. On the spot corrections, not waiting for you to do a bunch of bad things and then talk about how dumb it was in the back end. During this phase, it's immediate feedback. Like, nope, don't reset right back to 0. I'm not going to watch you do the wrong thing or just be in complete wrong approach to it right off the bat because it's just developing bad habits for no reason. I'm just going to nip it in the bud right there.
Okay.
From there, it's going into just real basic scenarios where you're starting to incorporate the tactical aspect in with the teachable or the part task teachable C intervention strategies, but not going crazy with a polytrauma patient right off the bat. It's just a tourniquetable wound, and you're going through the whole thing from your initial, hey, contact man down, dudes bang, bang, banging, troops in contact. Hey, buddy, can you hear me? Get back in the fight, crawl to me, get on a tourniquet, move up on patient, drag them back, throw on a tourniquet, call up to your first line leader. Hey, you, this is me. We got an eagle down. And then stop there. All right, cool.
Okay.
Say what we need to, and then reset. Do it on a million times until you never want to do it again. Then we add in the rest of M, and then we add in the rest of A, and then we add in the rest of R and C and H. And with that, you're just getting an incredible amount of repetitions, and that's the mainstay reason behind all of this. RCDP is rapid cycle deliberate practice. It's on purpose that we're doing this so many times because it's a repetition-based career field. None of us nugs could be successful if we didn't have a million repetitions on each one of these things, which is nice because you don't need a ton of foundational knowledge and theoretical framework. It is nice. It's a nice to have, but as far as being successful, it is just repetition based, just like shooting, just like physical fitness, just like battle drills, just like any other core level warfighter task. We're talking about repetitions. So it's a combination of quality, repetitions, and quantity. You can't just do quality and you can't just do quantity. It has to be good, perfect practice repetitions. And then once you're at that point, then we can start to incorporate FMPs, MASCALs, high fidelity simulation type stuff, integration of multimodality. You got role players and Randy and advanced medical training models, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what we typically see, as you're fully aware, is people jumping from, skipping zone 0. They don't care about foundation. Yeah, doc, we've done it. I've been around the block. I know what a tourniquet is. All right. Skipping zone 0, going from zone 1, and they go, you do a couple tourniquets. Here's a pressure dressing. All right. And then right into a MASCAL, 10 patient MASCAL at night, under nods. You get caught in an L-shaped ambush. One of the vehicles gets hit. The team leader gets killed in action. And it's just a bridge too far. And again, guys are walking away going, man, that was crazy. That was awesome. But did it actually result in any net positive gain as far as competency or knowledge, skills, abilities from any individuals or to the unit as a whole? Probably not, usually. Yeah.
No, everybody got smoked. We pulled all our cool toys. We ran around in the dark, which is always awesome. And everybody got a high five and we went home. But I mean, especially with budgets shrinking, time shrinking, each and every training event has to be like optimized to the fullest. And, if we're just screwing around, it's a waste of time. And we just use up money, we use up people, and we just wasted effort. Yeah,
with no established learning objectives, whether cognitive or practical, to even start with. So you can't even say whether or not it was positive or negative at all because you established no objective reasons as to why we were going to approach it in this way. And that's the other thing that's really lacking a lot of times is while it does work, especially in units with more funding, if you're just doing it all the time, then you are going to get better. At what rate is what is debatable. And and that becomes especially important as we look forward, in our hypothetical LSCO environment where dudes aren't going to get better as far as training is concerned. Once manning and attrition starts to take into effect as it drags on, training's not going to get like more robust. Is that going to be? It's people are going to get thrown into things they're not supposed to be doing. They're going to be, dentists are going to be battalion surgeons, things like that. So with that in mind, the approach to training needs to be very, very action focused and objective based, and with just repetitions in mind, or else you're going to continue to deploy people who aren't ready for it.
Right.
And that's been proven time and time again, whether we're talking about our side of the house with different world wars and Vietnam and stuff like that, or even more modern stuff with Ukraine, where you got truncated training pipelines due to manning and attrition issues, and then people just getting thrown into things they're not supposed to be doing. Combine that with lack of organic support in terms of ground evac and all that kind of stuff, and you get a recipe, or you create a scenario where things are going to start to fall off the wayside as far as care is concerned, or just competency is concerned. So
yeah. I mean, not even getting into like patient outcomes, just the training aspect. I wish so many times that somebody actually just, before we did this, thought about like, what is it that I want? What do I want out of this? Like, just be able to answer that question, honestly, and then build your training scenario around that. I think all too frequently I want my guys to run around in the dark and do medical stuff. And as long as you have those two scenarios happen, like, then it's a mission success and we can all go home. But there's no telling what damage you're actually doing, to the medical aspect or the individual soldiers when you just throw stuff at them.
Yeah, it's an untold amount of issues in terms of training scars being developed, bad habits being reinforced, things that can legit get them killed or their friends killed and make your life way more difficult as well, as if you are one of the medical providers within that unit. So their success is directly tied to your success in terms of the overall casualty response of the organic operational element. So no one approaches shooting in that manner,
right?
Marksmanship or battle drills or whatever. You don't start off with a live fire in the shoot house.
No. Every time you go to the range, what's the first thing everybody does? All right, line up. We're going 0. And
every training cycle starts like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
No matter how many deployments, no matter how many blocks you've been around, and you're starting off with 0 in. We're gonna start off with team dry fire, freaking react to contact, and you're gonna get it right and you're gonna get recocked until you get it right. And then once we got team all set up, and we're gonna do it at night and start from the bare bones again and work our way up to sims or live fire. And we're gonna do that for every single thing over and over and over again, for months and months and months on end. And then when it comes to medical, it's like, all right, we're going to do one day.
Right. Well, I mean, with the other type of tactical training, that's dangerous. I don't think anybody thinks that having an untrained or not fully trained medical provider is actually dangerous.
Yeah, but it is.
And it is 100%. He could easily be the one that killed your teammate,
that and just your general approach to casualty sustainment as an element can result in more casualties being sustained. Which obviously that's bad. It violates the goals of TCCC. But there's real world implications to being poorly trained, and not just TCCC, the part task intervention strategies. Those are easy, whatever. It's the response of the element. Far more people are going to be saved through prevention of casualties being sustained than any part task TCCC or PCC intervention. Especially in LSCO for a sustained period of time. Far more people are going to stay alive through just their proper approach to a casualty being sustained in front of them than anything else. And people and commanders need to recognize that, so that more emphasis is placed on it. And certain organizations are better than others. in that regard. But going forward, it is not like PCC is not going to solve your problems, just like Teachable C isn't going to solve your problems. But the causative response of the element can mitigate those problems. And more emphasis needs to be placed on that. And you gain that through a proper, deliberate approach to training as it pertains to medical stuff.
Now, jumping back into training, this is the DoD. We love stress. And anything that doesn't have lots of stress to it is actually not training at all. So, what kind of stressors are people like taking on while they're learning, and like how do I properly apply them?
Right. So there's a few different things that we use in the paper as far as our definitions of things. So what you're talking about is the cognitive load theory, or CLT, and that involves three different like loads of. I guess the way of describing is understanding how our brains process information when we're learning is cognitive load theory. Mm-hmm. And cognitive load theory includes like your intrinsic load, which is basically like the difficulty of the skill. Mm-hmm. So like think the difference between tourniquet and crike, right? Right. Some things are just inherently harder than others. Then you have your germane load, which is your germane load is essentially like the good kind of stress involved. Like it's the mental effort that you're using to understand and process the information. And then you have your extraneous load, which is just the unnecessary or distracting element that tends to just think of it as the bad kind of mental load that kind of negatively affects the germane load, mm-hmm. right? Because your idea behind CLT and applying it in training is that you're reducing extraneous load, managing the intrinsic factor of it, so how difficult the skill they're trying to learn is, and that way the most amount of resources in your brain or bandwidth can be applied to germane load, which is them actually taking something from it that results in far scale transfer of knowledge and their ability to reproduce that in the future. So if you just jump the gun on CLT and go straight into, like talked about, a friggin' 10 patient mass cow a night with an L-shaped ambush, it's like, no one's they're gonna spend all of their whole bandwidth inside their brain is going towards handling things they're not capable of understanding yet, and they walk away with so little of the germane load being utilized during that time frame that they're not able to really grow from it in any meaningful fashion, which is bad. And unfortunately, that's just what the majority of training typically is. So while it does work, if you go about that, you have to do it so often and so many times in a row for any net positive benefit that it's basically impossible to get to a point where they have developed skill mastery, right? Comparatively to if you if you reduced the extraneous load comparable to the intrinsic factor of the skill. If you go about it like that, you're gonna get more bang for your buck, and your return on investment is gonna be much better, especially when you have a reduced time to do things, which you often do.
Okay, so I mean, understood. It makes sense. Probably rock music during the lane, while spraying somebody with a garden hose. Probably not super helpful towards learning, how to do whatever. But, kind of that stress, and this is always thrown out, we need to stress inoculate these medics to the realities of combat, and, kind of essentially the sooner the better. How would you adapt training to, inoculate for when your learning objective is kind of like, you're going to go through a really stressful situation. How do I adjust fire on, my outcomes as far as medicine, as an example? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, one big overarching issue with training and people's approaches to training, especially on the medical side, is people. What's a better term for this? Because I don't know if it's good for the masses. They want to crush someone because that's what combat is. And it's very, very difficult to recreate the actual stresses of combat in a training environment. No matter how good you get it, no matter how amazing you get it, it's really actually extremely difficult to mimic it directly. So that's not what training or most training should be applied towards. Most training time should be applied towards gradual progression, logical progression of stress. And that way, and developing of hard skills. So skills acquisition, just being good at the things, mastery of those skills. And then you slowly start to add in external stressors as necessary once they've exercised some competency in the task at hand. But you only want to add like one at a time. That way you can scale it back as necessary based off of performance of the team or individuals, depending on where you're at in your learning phases. So, for instance, all I'm going to do on this next one is turn out the lights. All right, you're going to be under nods on this one. Yeah. All right, not going to add in any gunfire, not going to add in any polytrauma, not going to add another patient in and turn out the lights. Like, nope, just turn out the lights and see how we do. And then from there, all right, now I'm going to add another injury, or now I'm going to add another patient, or now I'm going to add on gunfire next to you, so on and so forth. That way you're just, that exposure that they're getting is never going to get into the extraneous aspect of it. It's just going to continue to stay right in between that intrinsic load and the germane side of the house, where like, all right, this isn't too overwhelming and I'm able to grow from this, but I'm on the cusp of being stressed out. That's finding the middle ground, and that sweet spot is your best friend. And the easiest way in my side of the house to do it is to just add another injury.
Yeah.
It's really simple. And then once I've exhausted all that, then I can just start to add patience. And then once we've done that, then we can start to turn out the lights. Yeah. And, that's a real easy way to go about it. You just can't add them all together. That's basically it. And that's your best friend there is not jumping the gun and not making it so difficult that it's a bridge too far for them to step too much. And I always like to imagine it like we'd go from skill stations to a mascal, and it's like that's like you're stepping 4 steps. What about all those little steps in between there would benefit them more greatly? Which is all right, maybe a demonstration of a trauma lane, and then now they get to do it. All right, cool. Yeah. Now let's do a talk through of roles, responsibilities of a mascal and how we're going to approach it. Where is everyone going to be? Who's going to be doing what, etc. Then we do it. And that's a much better way to go about it. And, the other thing I'll often see is kind of in the same vein is individuals, semis, whatever, they'll want to run like a mascal, for instance, and then say, then we're going to do a period of instruction on it, and then they're going to run it again. Right. Which my response always is, why not just do the POI beforehand and then they get 2 good runs? Well, I want them to feel the pain. And it's like, they shouldn't need to feel the pain unless there's like a cultural problem within the organization usually. If you have to like legit put someone into a situation that's either dangerous, unsafe, whatever, just for them to get the point of it, of why it's important to keep your finger off the trigger or something, like, okay, well, there's something else going on here. Or they just don't like you because you're a goofball. But in my experience, if you know what you're talking about and the approach to the curriculum was solid, no one has any issue listening to, and then, you could just get 2 good reps in the back end. You don't need to prove a point in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I don't even know if it's contrary to that at all. Where I've seen it somewhat positive, okay, is especially like the refresher course, like day 1. Okay. So nobody really knows each other that well. Everybody's still kind of smelling each other's butts kind of thing. And we are teaching about, different aspects of T-Tri-C, and everybody just gives you the nod. Right? And then, like, I've been playing this game long enough, like, I understand, like, you're not actually listening to anything that I'm saying, or you just assume that you already know all these things anyway. And so tomorrow, when we do our lane, I'm not going to make it difficult at all. Like the wound sets, I always do, like, this is straight up and down T-Tri-C. Like, there will be 1 wound, and the only thing that will make it difficult is the guy will be awake, or the guy will maybe like a chest injury. I won't give you unilateral rise and fall of the chest, something like that.
Yeah, I just want you to get through March pods in a timely fashion and just nail it. It's a softball scenario to just knock it out of the park.
It should be. But I've watched the wheels come off really quick because they don't actually pay attention. They don't actually know as much as they thought they knew. And it seems like at the other side, now you're finally willing to pay attention.
No, I mean, there are applications or scenarios in which you have to do that. Refresher being one of the few places where it's kind of just part of the game, or else no one's going to listen anyways. But it should be used sparingly and only for the right people. And that's where kind of adult learning principles and all that kind of stuff comes into it. Like, recognizing your audience and adjusting in real time is exceptionally difficult to do. It requires a ton of experience, but it is one of those things that kind of sets you apart from like an average instructor to a great instructor, is being able to be like, all right, this dude he ain't gonna care unless I crush him, is he? Like, dang it. But again, that just kind of goes back to culture, right?
Absolutely. Now, like, your brand new learners, on the other hand, like, they're eyes wide open. Like, I did the thing you want to do, and I did it, and I'm still alive. And you have their attention, right? So you don't have to do things like that. But some, definitely, like the more experienced guys, you have to get their attention somehow.
And it doesn't even have to be, that's a common scenario that I use as well. Obviously I've been to Refresher a few times. I'm well aware of that one, but, I just want to see you knock it out. I'll give you a, not even, one tourniquetable wound, a mid-thigh wound that's bleeding pretty good, and one chest wound. Patient's talking to you. I just want to see you run up and do this thing. Do what you're supposed to do your call outs, do the proper communication aspects in a timely fashion. Then we do a 5-minute reset AAR, run it again, and just run it again and again and again and again. It's just and that's the RCDP part of it, where you're like, I'm not doing anything, no crazy litter stuff, no long movements, no going through the river or underground in a tunnel or anything like that. I just want to get your feet underneath you. And set a standard for the rest of the week, for instance. Most guys, in my opinion, it is a culture problem. I'm just going to go back to that. Ranger shows up and for some reason they just care no matter what. And then you get a dude from NSW sometimes who's like the most genius individual ever, despite not having performed anything medical in the last 2 years. And they just shit the bed, for instance, and you're like, what is going on here? You guys went to the same course, you passed the same thing. You could be both from the same graduating class, but you're somehow in 2 years completely different practitioners.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How do you know when a learner, so let's say you're getting like brand new people, okay? And it's your job now to get them spun up for to be like truly operational. How do you know that they're ready to move over from like the skills, refreshing the skills, being proficient with the skills, into actually incorporating this?
Well, there's no real like established repetition count, right?
Yeah.
Like it's kind of just based off of what you're observing as the SME there. Some dudes it takes 1, 2, maybe 4, and you're like, all right, this guy's got it. Some dudes take 14. You know, it's just kind of, again, that goes back to adjusting based off of your audience. You can kind of tell real quickly in real time whether or not dudes are into it or they're not. You're losing them. All right, now I got to just up the ante a little bit then. Once everyone's on the same page and you're like, all right, any questions on, assessing an extremity average, doing the proper intervention in timely fashion? Nope. All right, now it's time to kind of up the ante again, or else no one's going to pay attention anymore. So it really just kind of comes down to what I tell dudes is, if we get to the end of the week and you never ever want to say, buddy, you all right, or see a tourniquet again, then I've done my job as far as approaching it correctly. But there is real no like hard and fast, when do I move from 0 to 1, from 1 to 2, or crawl to walk to run? A lot of times you're at the mercy of time.
Yep.
And that's just kind of the nature of the game. So just a good established framework will police up a lot of those loose ends, in my opinion, of like, all right, this is what we're doing today. This is how much time we're going to spend on skill stations. And this is how many reps dudes are going to get per individual part test event, for instance. Then we're going to move into this and this lab. And then we're going to move into trauma lanes where we kind of do progressive ballistic wounding and kind of police up any loose ends there. And that seems to work pretty well as long as you have an objective to the day or objective to the POI, each little phase of instruction. If you have no real rhyme or reason how you're going to approach it, and dudes are just going to do tourniquets until, maybe we just kind of guys are just talking bullshit and whatever, then yeah, you're probably not going to get much out of it, nor are you going to really know when it's ready to add in things or not, or progress from crawl to walk or walk to run. You're not really sure. You're just going to do it. And that's just a wrong way to approach it. But in my opinion, it's when dudes are all, you spent multiple times, they've done multiple repetitions, they're at the point where there's no questions, they're just nailing it from start to finish in terms of established guidelines prior to, and then they're just literally mimicking exactly what you demonstrated prior to them doing it. At that point, you're like, all right, let's move on to junctional hemorrhage. And then, all right, let's move on to airway. All right, let's move on to here. Once we've gotten all the way through the normal part task, teachable C stuff, now we can start to add in real mock baby stepping into trauma lane type of care under fire to tactical field care to into a building type stuff. But we kind of just reset back to this, not giving multi-system, just a tourniquet.
Right.
And a tourniquet and junctional hemorrhage. Then a tourniquet, junctional hemorrhage, and chest wound. We just do it over and over.
So what often happens, you get like on the calendar, hey, you get a full week of medical training. A month later, you get 4 days of medical training. 2 weeks after that, you get 1 day of medical training. Is it okay to just do walk phase, or, not that classical, walk, crawl, run, maybe walk, jog, or do we cut it off when like they've succeeded at least in that phase, for the amount of time I've given, hey, they're able to put a tourniquet on successfully, I'm happy.
If you're time constrained, I'm almost always going to go back to hard skill development, spending the most amount of time on that, as opposed to, okay, we only have a day, let's just do a crazy FMP type thing. Like you're not going to get anything out of that, definitely. Yeah. But you will get something out of doing some, multiple hours of RCDP on specific intervention strategies and then maybe a mock little lane at the end if you got time type of stuff. But yeah, I'm always going to go back to zone 1 or 2 or back to walk, and then maybe a little bit of a jog as opposed to going run, because we only got a day. Run. Like,
right.
No, you're not getting anything out of that.
Yeah. On the instructor side, there's not there's a lot of courses on Teacher IC as an example. There's not a lot of instruction or courses that you can go to learn how to be a better teacher, other than like becoming a teacher, I suppose. But how do you know if it's you that sucks? And like, how do I get better? How do I get better at my feedback? Just how do I succeed?
Well, I'm not sure I've cracked the code on that one by any means, but getting better it just takes deliberate practice, just like we've talked about previously on how you approach a scenarios. It requires deliberate practice in terms of professional development internally, and you gotta just, unfortunately, it just comes with experience a lot of times, but relevant experience is the big thing on that side of the house. There is no real instructor course that's of any high quality like usage that applies to operational medicine, the teaching of that, in my opinion. It really just comes down to where you grew up, what the culture was there, and who the heck your senior medic was, and whether or not they cared. Right. And I still think it's very similar to that these days, which it's not a problem. It's just that's what a major focus of this paper was, or purpose of this, is to at least start to develop a framework for people to dive into and be like, all right, this is actually something that's evidence-based in nature, and it's not just flying by the seat of our pants. Do we have a training program that kind of follows these principles in any meaningful fashion? If we don't, then let's start to work on one. And I think it starts there. And then, for individuals, it's really like just understanding what you're weak on and improving upon that, whether that be your public speaking skills or your ability to transition from one phase of instruction to another seamlessly, or adjust the scenario or difficulty of that in real time based off of student feedback, their experience level, and how they're responding to the training. Do I need to up this? Do I need to scale this down? Unfortunately, that stuff just comes with doing it a lot of times. Now, there are a lot of like RCDP and stress inoculation thing, that kind of stuff. Like Johns Hopkins has a rapid cycle deliberate practice course that you can pay to go to. That's a instructor course. How do I develop an RCDP program, basically? But it's primarily geared towards, hospital simulation and that kind of stuff, not really what we do. So, hopefully from this baseline, this acting as a baseline, we can, start to talk about, hey, how do we create good SMEs and maintain them? Where does it start? It's obviously starts at SOCM or SFMS or PJU or SODM or whatever, at least on the enlisted side. But where do they go from there? What's their guidelines? Like, what's their guiding principles behind being a good instructor or being a good mentor? Or, how do they, who cares? Right. And that needs to kind of happen sooner rather than later, in my opinion, or else I don't think that it's going to benefit us as a force having, in this hypothetical LSCO going forward. It's not going to benefit us at all in terms of potentially survivable death if we continue to go down the same path that we're going down. Dude, we have like the best stuff on the planet and still are at 24% as far as potentially survivable deaths on the battlefield throughout the GY. With the most robust evacuation network you can get, air superiority and everything else. So with that in mind, well, that number isn't that good. Right. So something's wrong. And, organizations like the Ranger Regiment have, less than 1%. That's on purpose. That's a culture thing. So something else needs to happen where force-wide there needs to be a better, SLC or ALC for medics needs to include something like this in it. Or it needs to be a standalone instructor course that's like, this is how you do things for real. This is because otherwise we're just going to continue doing the same thing been doing, which again isn't wrong. It's just not effective or as efficient as it possibly could be.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. With the Walker dip, like in full swing, we're hemorrhaging experience, which is going to be backfilled by inexperience. We need to have some kind of framework that even if somebody doesn't have 12 deployments under his belt, he can still teach. He can still increase the abilities of his more junior medics so that they can be successful.
Right.
Yep.
Totally agree.
Cool. When people read your paper, I guess what would be the main points you want them to get out of this?
Mostly like it's how does it apply to you specifically based off of where you're at task org wise within your organization, right? Because a SEMA might look at this and be like, yeah, whatever, I got it. Medics handle the training type of stuff. That's no biggie. But a medic might, junior medic might take this a little differently. So it's just kind of applying it where in your own reality and how does it relate to your sphere of influence? Like what can I do here based off of where I'm at with this information? And apply it effectively, right? Like, so it's just understanding that you want to be balancing realism and learning in training scenarios. You can't be trying to pop dudes cherries in training. Mm-hmm. Like it's not going to work. It's never going to happen, but it doesn't happen in any other capacity. You can get pretty close with like force on force type stuff, but not really anything on the medical side does an incredibly good job across the board. So just stop, because you're often going to get into the unwinnable gotcha scenarios that have an incredibly negative training effect, where fellows are just going to think that you're screwing with them to screw with them. Mm-hmm. And it's just not going to work. So just remembering that as you're developing scenarios for people, that it needs to be relevant, it needs to be rooted in reality, but also at the same time, it needs to be focused, actionable, focused on something objective-wise. Like, what is the point of this across the board? Not just on the medical side, but the tactical medical side as well. Like, what is the purpose of this on the tactic side, and what is it on the medic side? Mm-hmm. And then just how to give or reimagine how the way that you give feedback and whether or not it's important to the individual or not, or to the scenario or not in this at that time frame. Part of being a really good instructor is letting or just a leader in general is when to let things go and when to crush someone for them, right? Certain things just aren't worth bringing up in the grand scheme of things, depending on how they're doing, right? Like, if they're crushing everything else and the only thing they forgot was like they didn't put the time on the tourniquet or something mm-hmm. crazy like that, like perhaps we just it's just a one sentence, hey, remember to put that down if you didn't put on your casualty card, and we move on with our lives, as opposed to it being like a critical failure type thing whatever, so just understanding what's important, what's not in the grand scheme of things is really nice. And then the last thing is, it's just I don't know how I describe this. It's the overall goal at the end of the day is to build confidence in the non-medical side of the house. So you want guys walking away with not just that was good training, but I feel good. I feel more confident in my ability to reproduce these skills in the future and actually treat someone like, and I'm not going to have a feeling of hopelessness or helplessness during it. So it's really like the purpose of this and the purpose of the training and me approaching it like this is so that guys can walk away much more confident in themselves in their gear and not me feel better about myself because I crushed them. Right? Like, guy, yeah, you're amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's remembering that you're there for them and not the other way around, is the big thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What was I going to say? I guess feedback wise to, from, instructor to student, like how, like you mentioned some things not to do. Like, do you have any kind of framework as far as, I do the compliment sandwich, like, you were amazing on this, but this part you could work on, but I just want to tell you how awesome your hair is. Like, I guess, how do you accomplish this? Do you just go through the march sequence? You do through the time, like, hey, work on this. This is the real aspect we need to focus on.
Yeah. So one, feedback needs to be immediate. And it needs, again, I keep saying the same thing, it needs to be action focused. So what I mean by that in terms of feedback, though, is there needs to be a purpose to why you're bringing it up, and there needs to be a solution to that problem right now, whether through demonstration or explaining the right way to do it, and then demonstration, something like that. And then everything else can kind of just go by the wayside usually. So I'll go down the, my little skills assessment checklist or trauma assessment checklist, whatever, and just to give people peace of mind on the time side of the house and apply it in real life. Like, all right, yeah, we wanted MAR and done in 10 minutes because, well, you had a 10-minute loiter on a bird. So that's why we came up with that. There's no real rhyme or reason behind it. I just need to be able to say, all right, first run, it took you 9 minutes. Second run, it took you 7 minutes. And then the third run, it took you 4.5. So, and standards are still the same, wound set's still the same. So that means we're getting better. There's not any other rhyme or reason behind it. So just being honest with the guys as well about what the purpose of it is nice. Just so it doesn't seem like you're just kind of like a robot.
Yeah.
And then, I don't really agree with like the kind of, it's not bad in refresher, the way that goes about. It's just round robin techniques don't typically work super well, especially with a hodgepodge group of individuals, in terms of AAR. So really just kind of normal stuff, normal approach, like what was supposed to happen. We know what was supposed to happen because I demonstrated it beforehand, from point of injury to putting them in the next echelon of care, whether that be a bird, boat, or truck that picked them up. I already demonstrated that with the same wound set that you did. So you know what the standard is. Now your ability to reproduce that. We talk about the things that that was a shortfall, but I don't really like when people start adding in all sorts of their own thing or anything like that. Someone needs to be kind of the leader of it. And it should just be you. Usually one person is usually better, who had to step back on it. Then like everyone gets to say their 2 words, or 2 cents on it. Like, yeah, well, I probably wouldn't have done ketamine because, it's like, and then people have an argument about that. And, so again, action focus, give them a solution instantly, the right way to do it if necessary. And then, they should, recorrect it on the next run.
Okay.
Usually. Otherwise, if you kind of just leave it up in the air and you do a popcorn reading type of idea behind it, nothing really gets solved, usually, in my opinion. So,
right. So when you say like immediate feedback, like he doesn't drop his angle enough on the IV and he misses, do you like stop the lane kind of thing?
Not necessarily. It depends on what phase of instruction you're in. Right?
Okay.
So in zone 1, I might stop him immediately.
Sure.
In zone 2, he's already done that multiple times. Perfect practice, because that's how we approach zone 1. So in zone 2, now we've kind of applied it into a mock tactical scenario, and he makes that mistake. Oftentimes, I'm just going to let him do it.
Yep.
But it really depends on the individual too. Like sometimes if they're just struggling prior to, and it keeps being a problem, we've demonstrated it, we've gone through it again in the AR, and you're still seeing the same issues. It's like maybe it just takes a little bump, like, hey,
Yep.
think about what you're doing.
Yep.
I don't have to give them the answer, just give them like a little bump in the right direction.
Yeah.
And that's all that is. I'm not like I'm not stopping it. I'm not doing anything like that. Also, feedback can be given in relation to the scenario so that you keep the magic alive, right? Because you're playing, you got a bunch of different hats as the instructor, right? You're the talk, you're the senior NCO on target, you're the patient, maybe you're everyone. So you can use that to your advantage to keep them into this, keep the magic alive in the scenario and keep them engaged. So you don't have to stop the scenario, but you can say, hey, 9, this is 7, be advised, we're going to have to move here in a bit. Make sure you police up this, and this, or something like that. And they're like, oh yeah, I haven't checked around me to see if there's anything lying around or anything like that. Like policing up trash or something like that. So you keep them involved through stupid things like that, and it tends to work pretty well. And then it feels like they made the decision on their own, which goes on to the confidence side of the house, where you're like, you want them leaving with confidence no matter what. Because most likely, even in a validation exercise, no matter how poorly it goes, they're deploying.
Yep.
So they can either leave as best as possible or worst as possible, and your role in that can have a direct effect on how confident the team is leaving on that deployment. And I know that sucks, but it is just the nature of the game sometimes. And if you had to choose between the two, I'm going to choose them feeling as confident as possible going out the door than crushing them and saying you guys are the most worthless goofballs I've ever met. Good luck on your deployment. Like, don't go that route. Don't go that route. You don't have to.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Like everybody's got to leave, feeling more capable. And, if they don't, then what have you been doing this last, X number of days? If you're not moving somebody forward, at least in some kind of aspect of medicine, like you've wasted everybody's time. Yeah.
Money, time, you've possibly negatively affected your reputation in the organization. That goes a long way too. So there's a bunch of secondary and tertiary effects that come from producing or putting on bad training for individuals. As benign as it seems at face value, there are some serious implications to it, not just to the guys, but to yourself as well. So, yeah.
Very good. Well, I'm good. Is there anything else that we'd like to bring up?
No, not too much. I think we kind of hit everything. I definitely went on some tangents for sure. Good thing I didn't drink a beer before this, because who knows how long this would have lasted. Going into the nitty gritty of stuff, but I really want to, I don't want to understate or overstate, either or, the importance of avoiding no-win scenarios in training as it pertains to medicine. Giving dudes scenarios that are going, a patient's going to die no matter what they do. They can do everything right, but they're going to die. And that's my purpose of this scenario as an instructor or senior medic or whatever. Like, be very, very careful doing those kind of things, because if you don't do it with the right people, it has only a negative training effect. And you definitely want to avoid doing those kind of things with non-medical operators, because it seems pointless, it seems fruitless, and you really do need to continue to create and maintain buy-in from that side of the house. And you do that by a logical, approaching it in a progressive, logical way, but also by not jumping the gun on that kind of stuff and just being like, I'm screwing with you, because that's where that they're going to take it like you're screwing with them. So be very careful with that kind of stuff. Same thing on no win. You just give dudes a way to win most of the time. It can be an incredibly hard scenario. You know, you got an actual 10 patient mass cow at night with an L-shaped ambush with an appropriately competent operational element. So you have it, right? You got the kit and caboodle of a scenario. There has to be a way for them to win. You can't do that serious of a scenario with live patient models of ballistic and blah blah. Give them the most. This is it, and they got force on force, and then like kill the team leader, or do like talk injects, or injects like, oh, can't go that way. It's laden with IEDs, pressure plates all over that side, because they were in the process of, they did a no shit good leaders recon before they got onto the incident site. They found out where the enemy element was. They've sent someone or an element around to flank them so that the L-shaped ambush never happens in the scenario. And then you throw an inject like, can't go that way. It's like, dude, I'm not really into that kind of stuff. If they're gonna win, let them win, especially if they're doing super well. Yeah. Same thing. I know I already mentioned it, but like same thing with the mass cow part. Like team leaders doing super well, they're acting as a triage officer. You got the senior NCO doing what they're doing on weapon equipment side. He's set up a good security bubble, and he's handling that. And you got the junior medics handling inside the CCP, and everything's going well. We're triaging by precedence. We got all the gear in the middle. The mass cow tracker is beautifully filled out. It's being handed over to the RTO or JTAC to get called up. All this kind of stuff. Everything's going the way it's supposed to go. Roles and responsibilities are in the right places. And then you kill one of them off, a key leader off, just to throw a wrench in them. Avoid that kind of stuff. Very, very rarely do they get a good, really good repetition on when you get all that stuff together. So let them win. I think the only caveat to that is when, palliative care or what to do with a deceased casualty. Like, that's the point. Like, you can't. Not everybody wins all the time, and I don't think you need to crush like they screwed up an IV. Well, he died, right? That's not realistic at all. But having a catastrophic patient and understanding, hey, maybe we don't put all our resources into this guy, resources that we have precious few of anyway. Being able to handle a decision like that, even if it's, hey, call somebody and get their advice. But that would be, I think, the one exception to everybody wins is when you have a specific objective, like this is how we're going to handle a deceased casualty. Yeah, definitely not saying don't put KIA into scenarios. That's definitely not it. It's don't do it haphazardly with no rhyme or reason behind it. Yeah. Obviously, palliative care is incredibly important to practice beforehand. It's just don't do it with no care involved in it, or don't do it like where everything's going right, everything's going well. We're at like the zone 3 now, where like we're really picking up steam, things are looking good, and then we just throw a wrench in there and go, no matter what you did, it died. Anyways, it's like maybe we just make sure it's with the right people, right time, and that it's digestible for the individuals. It's not just this guy's screwing with us. Because it does cost a lot of money and time and energy to run a scenario where everyone dies. Still, it still is a time-intensive, resource-intensive, manning-intensive type of idea. And if the whole thing was like, oh, we're just going to kill off all the patients, that makes no sense, right? So just be careful with it. That's all I'm saying. Make sure there's some purpose behind it. And that's really it. That's kind of, that's part of being the good, going back to the good instructor thing. When do I do this? Well, that just comes with experience a lot of times when it's necessary. In my side of the house, it just happens organically because of the model that I use primarily. So we get to talk about palliative care and when that's going to happen, and talk about all the different things involving it and when it's going to be appropriate or not, especially once we get into the PCC side of the house. We got to hang out with them for a few hours, and you got maybe 3 patients there. You're like, what are we thinking about here? And then it just kind of organically happens anyways because of the injury set the patients had. And then the lack thereof of proper care based off the scenario that happened on the tactical side. So it just kind of happens. I get that not everyone has that privilege to work with models that regularly, that kind of just do that on their own sometimes, just like it happens in real life. But yeah, it's, again, just be careful when you're doing gotcha stuff. You know, you're not really doing anyone any benefit when you're doing it most of the time. Most of the time it's being introduced to say, this is what the battlefield is like, this is mimicking chaos, and this is what it's going to be like, and they oftentimes just lack really any realism or relevance.
I agree. I agree. Well, awesome talking to you, John.
Yeah, that was great.
Cool.
Appreciate you, man.
Hey, thank you. That's it for today's podcast. Make sure to go to our website, www.prolongedfieldcare.org. Check out our free downloads and a ton of other helpful information. Grab a bag of our fresh roasted PFC coffee, links in the description below, and stay on the bleeding edge of combat and austere medicine. This is Dennis for the PFC podcast. Out.